I remember once during a live premiere of my video on my YouTube channel, I was called out by one of my subscribers as being a flip-flop. I'm not a flip-flop. I want James Gunn to be successful with what he's doing with DC. I love his Free Guardians movies, I love the Suicide Squad, and I love Peacemaker. In terms of comic book movies and his one streaming show he's made, I think he's done a really, really good job. I love the Snyderverse. I love what Zack Snyder did with DC. That doesn't mean I'm not going to criticize both men when I see the need to. But the problem is when people consume content creators' platforms, they want an echo chamber. I am nobody's echo chamber. I am my own echo chamber. You know, I've been absolutely disgusted in the way James Gunn and Zaslav have promoted this year's remaining DCEU movies, spreading misinformation about Tom Cruise loving the Flash movie. James Gunn coming out and saying that the Flash movie was one of the best comic book movies he's ever seen. Zaslav saying it was the best comic book movie he ever saw. Stephen King, don't know where I got Spielberg from, but Stephen King saying the Flash movie was amazing and he doesn't even like comic book movies. These are untruths, everyone, just to sell movies. The other day, James Gunn was answering fan questions. He admitted to a fan that he understands how people are confused about his plans for DC Universe. Then he comes out in the next breath and says nothing will be canon until Superman Legacy and Creature Commandos. But then he contradicts himself and basically gives us a list of 3 actors from the previous regime, from the previous franchise, the DC Extended Universe, right, that will be part of the new universe. So how can nothing be canon until Superman Legacy and Creature Commandos? But then you're telling us that John Cena, Xolo Maradona are going to be part of the new universe, even though they're from the previous universe. So how can nothing be canon till Creature Commandos and Superman Legacy? It's contradictory and it's confusing. And this is the problem. This is why people are confused. And some people are angry with the removal of Henry Cavill as Superman. But I understand why James wants to cast his own Superman. I get that. Then there's the issue of the DC documentary, which refused to have Zack Snyder's Justice League footage and purposely had Justice League footage in that documentary. A documentary that is supposed to celebrate DC. You know, so I can like James Gunn, right? It's like Zack Snyder. I love the Snyderverse, but I've criticized him. You can't do a Superman rebirth story after killing the character off in a Justice League movie and have Superman in about that much screen time of a Justice League movie. I can say I love the Snyderverse, I love the Snyder Cut, but that was wrong. I can also say it was wrong of them to have Superman snap Zod's neck, but love Man of Steel. That is not being a flip-flop. That is just being totally honest. And this is where we are. And also, I need to ask the question, what do you think about this? Comment down below. Do you think pre-existing properties should mean that directors get creative freedom? I mean, DC has been owned by WB for over 5 decades. Do you think they bought DC Comics so they could say, oh yes, let's give directors creative freedom? Yeah, that's what we'll do. No, they bought DC Comics so they can make as much money from it, from making movies and animation. And they have. So I don't actually think that when directors are brought on board, they should just blanketly, on pre-existing properties, get creative freedom. If you want creative freedom, go and work for a small studio on a small picture that costs around 100 million to make, right? No one will interfere with your vision then. But when you're dealing with pre-existing characters, then you've got to work with the studio. Zack Snyder wouldn't work with the studio. He always says no compromise. Unfortunately, you're working with a pre-existing IP. What did you expect? There was this fallout after Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Kevin Reynolds wasn't happy because the studio were interfering, because it was a pre-existing property. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves made a lot of money. Ultimately, the studio were right. And if you work with the studio, it's better than working against the studio. That's my humble opinion.